So, you know, I had a kind of a heroic image of my dad. My mother was beautiful, looked like a movie star, you know, so I had big images of both of them. Well, there was like this long thing, and the lady said, Mr. Boje, you have an incredible record here. You've been to jail more times than anybody here today. And I had to explain to them, I said, look, I don't know how to type. I was kicked out of typing in high school. No problem. You've got good test scores, you know math. So I got to be able to type laundry lists, and I got to be able to type with all 10 fingers, and they made me a company clerk. So when I got to Vietnam, after married, the woman was pregnant, I had to get married. So I'm in Vietnam, and I arrived there. So I don't know what happened to everybody else, but I went to Saigon to be a company clerk. It was a company that does like libraries, bowling alleys, craft clubs, service clubs where the women dance with the soldiers, and they serve whatever they serve, and handball courts, basketball, gymnasium, Olympic swimming pool, the whole bit. And this captain would have his office and a phone on his desk, right? And we'd be out in the outer office where the front door was, and we'd be handling like all the work, you know, like personnel assignments, payrolls, all the rest of that kind of stuff. We're doing all that. And morning reports, we get up at 5 a.m. and you write a morning report for the idiot that shows up at 7 a.m. You know, anyway, so that's the way military kind of works. The way he trained me as a clerk is he would walk behind my head and thump me on the back of the head with his 400 weightlifting pound finger and go, have you ever been thumped in the back of the head? But it's like,
it's awful.
Consider it like a punch in the back of the head. So whenever, if I wasn't typing, he would thump me, say, get back to work. So I just sat there for 6 months and said, now's the time for all good men to come there. I typed that literally 5 million times to keep from being thumped in the head. By the time 6 months was done, I was a nervous wreck. So the major there, pretty good guy, he said, look, Boje, you've been company clerk for about 6-7 months. You've done a good job. You've been up every morning. Reports are flawless. What do you want to be? I said, I'd like to be the golf pro, sir. And he said, okay, you got the golf shack. You organize golf tournaments. You wear a white shirt like Duncan's got on. You have a name tag. No more fatigues except when you're on guard duty. So that's what I did for the last 6 months. Never played golf in my life. Never had even held a golf club. So how do you become a golf pro? You read a book by Arnold Palmer, who was a good golfer, and you follow the illustration. Well, in the golf shack, I could read a book a day from the library, because basically what do? You get up early in the morning, you're there by 7:30, you pass out all the green fees to the chauffeurs of the generals and the captains. There's half a dozen left for enlisted men. Then you do nothing until they start coming back in the afternoon. So you got all this time to do that. And then some of them come back, and then you do that. And you got to stay there till 5, because that's the rule. Nobody's there, but you got to. So you had just about 6 hours a day to do nothing but read. So I read a book a day. I got to where I could read a book a day, and I would read the Beatles and the history of this and that and other things. So I taught myself to read. So when I got back out of Vietnam, they said, okay, you got another year, but you could get out of the military 4 months early if you go to college. I asked my dad about it. I said, should I go to college? Nobody in the family tree's ever been to college, and you weren't that good in school, David, so I don't think college is sort of your thing. I said, Dad, but I've been reading a lot in Vietnam, and I was a company clerk, and I can now type. Those are good skills for college. He said, yeah, okay. He took me to B'nai B'rith, gave me IQ tests all day, half a day anyway. And my dad wanted to be sure that I could handle this college thing because he didn't go to college. My mother never went to college. Nobody in either side of the family tree ever set foot in a college. So I took all the tests and the guy got done. Now, my dad's a trickster. So when they got done, they called me in a room and they said, David, these tests, we're not going to tell you the score, but we think if you worked extremely hard, maybe you could do it. I said, I've never been to college. How's it work? He said, well, you're in Burlington County College. It's an experimental college. We do programmed learning here. Okay, that sounds good. What does that mean? He said, well, we diagnose your learning problems and then we assign you modules in whatever course you're in. And then it's self-paced learning. You can take them all in class with a bunch of other students, or you can work through the modules on your own, go at your own pace and finish. So for example, I got an English class and they said, okay, you don't know how to do any kind of essay, so you're going to do the essay module. You don't know what a paragraph is, so you're going to do the paragraph module. You don't know what thesis sentence is, so you're going to do the thesis sentence. So those are number 82, 150, and 247. So you're going to do those three modules and come back and take the test. So I took the modules and, okay, I could figure out a thesis sentence and I could figure out this kind of an essay. Okay, now you're going to do these other two kinds of essays. You're going to take module 68 and module 149 and do those, master those, come back. We'll do an assessment class. I buzzed through there. I don't know, I did a bunch of modules. But it's sort of like that movie Matrix, like when they're plugging you in the chair and he says, now you know Kung Fu. I know Kung Fu. So then they stick me in on the same thing in calculus. They have a calculus class. It's the same thing. You can sit in a classroom with some teachers trying to pretend how smart they are, or you can go take these modules and actually learn. So I'm the only one that finished the calculus class because I did all the modules. So I know calculus. And then the other class, my first semester, was speed reading, which is incredibly useful as an editor, as a writer, as somebody's got to read mass quantities of articles. Anyway, so I worked incredibly hard. Like, how hard did I work? I would interview all my teachers and say, what are your books and what are your assignments? I said, why do you want to know? We don't even start for 3 weeks. I said, well, I want to get a head start on this. So I'd get the books, I'd start practice testing all of the material, and then I would be ready to hand in the paper when he said, paper's this. I would be ready. I mean, I was like ahead of the curve. I took it as a job, a full-time job, using all my company clerk skills. Then they had, in the seminars, they had like marvelous teachers. I remember Mr. Miller says, I'm Mr. Miller, I'm going to teach you management, okay? And that guy taught me like path analysis, causal chains and root cause analysis and cost benefits. And so he actually taught me stuff, you know? Anyway, I turned around, graduation day, my dad shows up. My mother and my dad never show up at the same time, by the way, because this wouldn't be working out. But he showed up with, it's either his first or second wife. Anyway, he showed up and they pulled me out of line graduation and said, there's been a mistake, Boje. You should be given the valedictorian because you graduated first in your class from this college. I graduated first, and so I that's a 2-year school, you know, just 2 years county college. And so I walked into Rider College, now Rider University, which is outside Princeton. I said, look, I graduated first in my class. I'm a Vietnam veteran. What can you do for me? And they said, here's a full scholarship. I said, don't have to fill out paperwork or anything? Yeah, but you graduated first in your college from a county college in New Jersey. Here's a full scholarship. Okay.
Yeah.
So I did my homework there, and then they had like amazing teachers there and really great discussions. And I was on fire, baby. I was on fire, and I was just practicing the tests, practicing memorizing stuff, like working. My dad's company was failing by then. He sold it for $3 million. Saul got $1 million. Sam got $1 million. My dad got $1 million. My dad managed to lose $1 million in less than a year. How the hell do you lose $1 million? I was in the business college in Rider University now, studying all this stuff in accounting and everything else. And all of a sudden there's like no business to run. So I'm like,
Whoa.
but I graduated first in my class again. And then reality hit, because I applied to Stanford and Harvard and every other fine place. I figured, well, I graduated first in my class twice. Yeah, but you failed the GMATs. I don't know if you know what a graduate management and admissions test. You scored a 440 on your GMAT. You know how low a 440 is? We don't admit anybody into Harvard, Stanford, or Northwestern, any of these schools with a 440, okay? It's 600, 700, and above. So I said, okay. So I applied to a few more schools. And the University of Illinois somehow didn't look at the test scores, and they only looked at I had a straight A average and graduated top and blah, blah, blah. And they gave me a fellowship to their MBA program. Cool. I already know all that stuff they're teaching. It is boring and they're not teaching it that well, by the way. They're standing up there, they're lecturing, and we're taking notes, and they're like, okay, are you kidding me? So I guess I'm a bit arrogant. So they said, look, why don't you take some of these electives? You're allowed to take some of them, even if the master's student. I said, okay. So I took it and I aced it. I aced my org behavior thing, and I aced another environmental course. So I aced a couple of their doctoral seminars, and I'm signing up for a third one. And they said, look, Boje, we're going to put you in the PhD program conditionally. I said, what does that mean? You get to take more PhD seminars, and you won't have to take that finance course that you're in. I never much liked that finance course. And you get into the PhD program. What they didn't tell me is what do PhDs do. They didn't tell me that I would be writing stuff and teaching stuff. And then those are the two things, by the way, PhD programs don't teach you to do, is how to teach and how to write, in my professional opinion. I think they're better now because the people have to write so much, they need to have those skills. So my first semester, I'm teaching a course in management of all things. Noticing that they're sitting there in tears. There's about 50 students. They're not in tears, but they're almost in tears and sitting in tears, and they're reading newspapers. They're all like, remember, this was before cell phones, and they're reading these newspapers. At one point, I said, I don't think you're learning anything. And one of the students quipped, I don't think you're teaching anything. You're rather boring. All you do is lecture at us, and we're not really learning anything. So tell me some of the problems you see in the class. And I proceeded to write the problems on the board. We're having trouble paying attention. There's no motivation in this class. There's no experiences in this class. It's positively boring. It has nothing to do with real life. And I filled 2 boards with that stuff. And I said, okay, the rest of the semester, we're going to tackle these problems. And one team's going to be the HR department. One's going to be the marketing department. What does HR do? They keep track of your grades. Oh, okay. What's HR do? They keep track of your grades. I just said that. Okay, what's marketing do? Well, They promote new material that we're going to go over. Okay. Well, what's the factory job? Well, that's production. They produce all the material. They produce the tests. You got to have tests, right? So they'll produce the test. Okay, what are we doing? Well, we're going to be called the Greenback Company. That means it's green for the environment because there actually are trees and water out there. And we're going to look at the green that you raise, the money. So we're going to have an accounting department that keeps track of accounting. They're going to account for all of your showing up or not showing up, and they're going to cost all that out. And I want you now to appoint a manager for each department. So by the second class, they had teams, they had managers. Okay, now I want you to elect a president of the company and a vice president, and then you'll have the manager board, and then we'll tell you what. So they elected somebody, and you're gonna produce these books on management, where you write about management, and you're gonna collect stories and write these stories about management. By the end of the semester, I was like popular because I was the only one doing non-lecture in 14 sections. And so I was just different. I don't know. I was popular because I was different. But let me show you what happened. On a typewriter, Professor Louis R. Pondy, that's it at the bottom. See what it says, Lou? He types me this letter. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but he says, Dave. By the way, my first marriage, I was Dave. Anyway, he says, Dave, I have a super idea. I was very impressed by your comments on page 5 of this paper, your personal strategy for reorganizing the management course 210, it's called. How would you like to be the coordinator of the 210 courses for 1997, 1978? All 14 sections. I would continue to be your informal advisor, like not the real advisor. He was always my mentor like that, but would go on to some organizing project myself. In other words, he's gonna like do something else and leave me in charge, like reorganizing the MBA program or something. You could recruit people into the PhD program and groom them as your successor. I could try to arrange a postdoctorate fellowship for you for 78 in 1979. And you could coordinate these courses while you're in the PhD program. You're truly an amazing fellow, Dave. You have a rare ability to have creative ideas and put them into practice. I'd like to do my own little part in giving you as much room to operate as possible. And it just goes on. I'm willing to provide you with political protection. You must be optimistic. You can be a multiplier for a large-scale organizational change. Can you imagine your doctoral advisor sending you a letter like that? So that's Louis R. Pondy. I don't know if you know who Louis R. Pondy is. Systems theory, he was worked with Carl Weick. He was recruited by Herb Simon and James March, Carnegie Mellon. He was that first group of bright students. He was a physicist. And he was just the brightest guy. We used to call him Leaping Lou. He would just leap around the room and just draw these models. That's why I love to draw the models. He'd draw all these models. And you couldn't read a darn thing he's writing, which I've perfected that skill. And then he would just, you'd be downtown in Champaign-Urbana and having a beer, and he'd be writing on the tablecloth. He'd be writing on the board, piece of paper. And he just wanted to take over the academy. He took over the research methods division and made them change the bylaws so he wouldn't have to be track chair or any of those other stupid jobs. He just would come in as division head and take it over. And so he's the one that challenged me. He said, Boje, you're a storyteller. I don't want you to do this theoretical crap. You write stories, you're a storyteller. Just tell stories, write stories, do stories. That's what you're good at. Get over it. And I said, okay. he made a backroom deal with UCLA to hire me as a professor there because they wanted a good placement. I had an offer from Florida State and from UCLA, and they wanted me to take UCLA because it's better for University of Illinois to place somebody at UCLA than Florida State. I think Florida State would have been a better bet, by the way, because I wound up in a war. I thought Vietnam was a war. No, Vietnam was easy. This was the war against the strategy department and the phenomenology department of the management school. Did you know management school had a phenomenology department? You probably didn't. There's the only one in the whole world at the time. So I had read phenomenology in Lou Pondi's class. I read Ideas and other books by Husserl. And so I was used to it. And so the phenomenologist, Lou sold me as a phenomenology person, but to the strategy people who had the power base of the school, he sold me as an interorganizational theorist, interorganizational relations and all that stuff, which my dissertation was on. And so I'm at the interview. I don't know I have the job, so I'm trying to impress them. The advice from my committee was to, when they take you to eat, David, choose the most expensive items on the menu so that you look like you're worth it. I said, okay. So they took me to this restaurant, and so I ordered the most expensive lobsters. And I was not a vegetarian at the time, and everything else, and the most expensive desserts and the drinks. Well, anyway, these guys had to put their wallets together. I don't know what happened to credit cards, but they were like they were spending an awful lot of time on that side of the table trying to pay for this thing. When I got to my presentation, I presented a little bit, and I noticed that the strategy people were all on one side of the room. I mean, way on the other side of the room, like a high school dance with the boys on one side and the girls on the other. And the phenomenologists were on the other side of the room. So my big intervention was saying, hey, how about we all sit together? Phenomenologists decided that was an amazing intervention, and they hired me. And the strategy people decided, well, Lou Ponti likes him, he must be good, so let's hire him. So anyway, I got hired. I got there to Los Angeles. I go to UCLA. I go to the management school. I knock on the door of the dean and the dean's secretary. I said, hi, I'm David Boje. I was hired as your professor. I'm here to start teaching in, a couple weeks away. Where do I live? Where's my money? They said, well, you don't get paid until after you're here. And you don't have a place to live. You have to find a place to live yourself. I said, I have a family. I have 2 kids. And they said, okay, but you still have to find a family. You and your family have to find a place to live. You can't stay here. We don't have housing for faculty here. I said, oh, I've never been to LA. Where do I look? So, because I wasn't really scoping out these things in advance. So I had a few bucks. I went to Sawtell in Sawyer Street. It's on the border of a Jewish and African black neighborhood. Let's just say black and Jewish. Okay, you do not move on borders, okay? Borders is not a good place to be, but it is a cheap place to find a place to live. So I go there and I'm looking at these apartment buildings. This Egyptian man is showing at me this apartment. So I'm like in the apartment and like there with the 2 kids and my wife. I notice I can open the windows that seem to be latched, but I said, this doesn't seem safe. He said, no. And there's strange people running around screaming things and trying to sell my wife dresses. I said, yes. I said, I don't think this is going to work. He said, wait a minute. Let me show you one other place. And he takes me to his house. And he said, what if you rent this house that I'm in now? Well, it had knotty pine windows, knotty pine walls and ceilings. And it had 2 fireplaces. It had 4 bedrooms. It was a fantastic house. It's in the same neighborhood. He said, I'll move out of this. You pay me $1,000 a month. I said, I don't get paid for another month. And then I didn't even know if there's probably another month I'm waiting for the check. He says, it's all right. I trust you. So he moves out of that house with his wife and moves into the apartment. I move into this house and I'm in LA and I'm ready to teach.